Now, with all your headlines this Christmas Day, it's the ITV News.
Praise from the King for the royal family's medics in this year's Christmas message.
From a personal point of view, I offer special heartfelt thanks to the selfless doctors and nurses who this year have supported me and other members of my family.
While he showered them with praise, at Sandringham, the Princess of Wales is showered with flowers, a return to the spotlight for some, though not all, of the royal family. Also tonight, Christmas time in war and peace, celebrations around the world as the Pope calls for a silence of arms. How did anyone walk away from this wreckage? Dozens dead in a Kazakh plane crash, but somehow more than 20 survive. Plus,
these grains here are the leftovers from the whiskey distilleries. Very Scottish diet, but it's not alcoholic, I'm afraid.
feeding time for Britain's only free-roaming reindeer colony.
This is ITV News with Yasmin Bodalbhai.
Good evening. The King has used his traditional Christmas broadcast to praise his and Princess Kate's selfless medical teams. His message came at the end of a year when both were treated for cancer. He also referenced ongoing wars around the world, as well as communities here at home who came together after the summer's riots. This morning, senior royals attended church on the Sandringham estate, as our royal editor Chris Shipp now reports.
With the walk to the 11 o'clock church service at Sandringham today, royal tradition was maintained. But no year has been quite like the last one. As the Princess of Wales held tightly to the hand of her youngest son, Prince Louis, she might have been reflecting on how, this time last year, no one in this family knew that cancer would touch two of them in 2024. The other difference from Christmas morning last year was the notable absence of Prince Andrew and his former wife, the Duchess of York. Their eldest daughter was there. Beatrice decided not to travel abroad to her in-laws as she's due to have her second child in early 2025. So as they filed into church, much to reflect on from a year none of them expected to have.
I am speaking to you today from the chapel of the former Middlesex Hospital in London.
This year's Christmas message was recorded in a place with medical connections for reasons the King himself explained.
All of us go through some form of suffering at some stage in our life. From a personal point of view, I offer special heartfelt thanks to the selfless doctors and nurses who this year have supported me and other members of my family through the uncertainties and anxieties of illness, and have helped provide the strength, care and comfort we have needed.
The King was, of course, talking about his and the Princess of Wales's cancer treatment this year. Another significant event which moved the King in the last 12 months was the reaction to the killings of 3 girls in Southport, the riots which erupted across the country in the following days. In his message today, the King focused on the unity rather than the division.
I felt a deep sense of pride here in the United Kingdom when, in response to anger and lawlessness in several towns this summer, communities came together, not to repeat these behaviors, but to repair. To repair not just buildings, but relationships. And most importantly, to repair trust by listening and, through understanding, deciding how to act for the good of all.
Listening was a recurring theme in the speech, something the King did on his visit to Australia with indigenous communities affected by colonial rule. And 2024 has also been, he said, another year of suffering in places both near and far.
On this Christmas Day, we cannot help but think of those for whom the devastating effects of conflict in the Middle East, in Central Europe, in Africa and elsewhere, pose a daily threat to so many people's lives and livelihoods.
It was, said the King,
Why not?
in a spirit of understanding that he conveyed his Christmas wishes.
I wish you and all those you love a most joyful and peaceful Christmas.
There was a rare personal note from the King in the message which he recorded in this chapel. Uncertain and anxious was how he had described the year for both himself and the Princess of Wales. And of course for the King, his treatment continues into 2025. Back at Sandringham, the King was able to leave church knowing his younger brother Andrew wouldn't be making any headlines for the wrong reasons, so Charles and Kate could focus on spending the day with those closest to them. It's also been quite the year for Queen Camilla, who, when the King, William and Kate were away from the public eye, kept the royal show on the road almost single-handedly. The family will now dial down their public engagements before what will be, we are told, a near-to-normal service as possible next year. Chris Ship, ITV News.
Well, as we heard, the King spoke earlier of the devastating effects of conflict, and that was a theme shared with the Pope's Christmas address. From the Vatican, he called for the sound of arms to be silenced, while around the world Christians came together to worship in war and in peace. Mahathir Pasha reports.
In the traditional birthplace of Christ, worshippers gathered for midnight mass. Hundreds joined the chorus in Bethlehem to mark the coming of Christmas. From the Middle East to Ukraine, such is the state of the world at the end of 2024. President Zelensky donned military khaki for his Christmas address.
We are fighting today for the main symbol of this holiday, for hope and the victory of life. We know this, the world knows this, and God knows this.
At the epicenter of Catholicism, pilgrims flocked to catch the opening of the Vatican's 2025 Jubilee. Christmas marks the beginning of this once-in-a-quarter-century tradition that dates back to the year 1300. At noon, Pope Francis delivered his Urbi et Orbi, or To the City and the World address, a blessed sermon reserved for the most solemn occasions. Brothers and sisters, do not be afraid, he said. This Christmas I invite every individual and all peoples and nations to become pilgrims of hope, to silence the sound of arms and overcome divisions. In other parts of the world where Christians are a minority, celebrations still proved festive. At St. Patrick's Cathedral in Karachi, Pakistan, devotees expressed gratitude for their freedom to worship.
Every Mass we have full security, and with full joy we celebrate the Christmas in Pakistan.
But these freedoms are precious. In Syria, the burning of this Christmas tree triggered protests in Damascus. Authorities there have insisted minority rights will be protected. Services today appear to happen without problems as it enters its new chapter.
Welcome to the International Space Station.
Far away from worldly affairs, in space, a Christmas like no other, as two NASA astronauts still stranded after 7 months filmed a festive message.
Merry Christmas!
Back down on Earth, thousands packed the beaches of Sydney in Australia, partying under the sun on Christmas Day. It will no doubt have been a contrasting affair for the many people around the world, but some things are universal when it comes to Christmas. Worship, celebration, reflection, and of course, a good meal. Mahathir Pasha, ITV News.
Well, here the Archbishop of Canterbury was absent from public church services today, having resigned last month amid criticism of his handling of safeguarding concerns. It meant focus shifted this morning to the Archbishop of York's Christmas Day sermon. Stephen Cottrell, who has himself also faced calls to quit, acknowledged that the Church of England needs to change in the wake of a number of abuse scandals.
Right now, this Christmas, God's church itself needs to come again to the manger and strip off her finery and kneel in penitence and adoration and be changed.
On to the rest of the day's news, and dozens of passengers have died after a plane crashed in Kazakhstan. But of the 67 aboard, miraculously, it's thought that 29 somehow survived. The Azerbaijan Airlines flight, which was heading to Russia, burst into flames as it attempted an emergency landing. Alex Isat reports.
Thick black smoke rises into the air after a passenger plane crashed in Kazakhstan, breaking apart on impact, killing over 30 passengers. Carrying 5 crew members and 62 passengers, the Azerbaijan Airlines flight had taken off from the capital and was heading towards Russia when it declared an emergency situation. Footage of the Embraer 190 plane show the pilot pulling the plane out of a steep fall as he sought to regain control. The wheels come down in an attempt at an emergency landing before the catastrophic crash. As emergency services rushed to the scene, survivors began emerging from the tail end of the craft. Officials say 29 people, including 2 children, were taken to hospital. Calling the crash a great tragedy, Azerbaijan's president vowed to uncover what happened.
A criminal case has been opened, and naturally the Azerbaijani public will be regularly informed. I feel the pain of those who died and were injured in the accident.
Emergency services remain at the scene as the investigation continues. Alex Isat, ITV News.
Here, the police complaints watchdog has launched an investigation after armed officers shot and killed a man in Worcestershire yesterday evening. They were called out over reports of a man with a knife in Redditch. He was shot dead after a standoff that lasted for hours. The force has referred itself to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. And a man's been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after a car hit pedestrians in London's West End. Police were called in the early hours of this morning. They say it was an isolated incident and not terror-related. Now, after decades on the cobbles, tonight Weatherfield said goodbye to one of its longest-standing residents. Gail Platt, played by Helen Worth, bid farewell to Coronation Street after 50 years on the show. In the episode, she finally got her happy ending, sharing special moments with family and friends. The actress thanked viewers for coming on the journey with her. And finally, this Christmas night, Santa's duties may be over for another year. His reindeer surely now enjoying a well-earned rest. But far from the North Pole lives Britain's very own free-ranging herd. They've been roaming the Cairngorm since the 1950s. Spotting them, though, is not always easy, as Aisha Zahid reports.
For decades, reindeer have been roaming in the heart of the Cairngorm Mountains. Around 150 of them live here, and each morning it's up to Lottie to rally the herds for breakfast with a very distinctive call. This low sound travels far enough so that they all get the message, but it can be hard to tell if they're actually on the way.
Reindeer are an incredibly well camouflaged animal. They'll change their camouflage for the summer and the winter, but it means that you can't really see them when they're in the snow at the moment.
More than 1,000 years ago, reindeers totally disappeared from Scotland's landscape. But in 1952, they were reintroduced to the area by Mikael Utsi and his wife, Dr. Ethan Lindgren. And they've been here ever since, with plenty of people paying visits to see them.
What does it feel like now? It almost felt like we're at the North Pole.
Believed to be Britain's only free-ranging reindeer herd with 4,000 hectares to explore, they build up quite an appetite, feasting not on carrots, but a byproduct from the alcohol industry.
These grains here are the leftovers from the whiskey distilleries. Very Scottish diet, but it's not alcoholic, I'm afraid.
Perhaps that's just as well, though for them it's still been a very Merry Christmas. Aisha Zahid, ITV News.
And that is it from us for tonight. We'll be back with updates throughout Boxing Day tomorrow. But from everyone on the Christmas Day team, thank you for staying up with us. Good night.
My name is Joe Petrus.